Welcome, beloved, as we embark together on a sacred journey of light and grace. Selected 1. There are rumors of an empire collapsing circulating through the underground networks. The person who planned the most complex psychological warfare campaign against you is witnessing the collapse of their entire world in real time. This isn't your typical fall, though. It's cosmic vengeance at a frequency that most people never see. What is happening to you is the universe's reaction to someone who dared to use their authority as a weapon against the very purpose of God. And you are a chosen one. I will tell you the whole extent of this great devastation, because you will get knowledge that turns you from target to untouchable if you know how this game was played and how horribly it backfired. The perfect storm that is currently destroying your opposition was formed by the combination of 3 distinct actions. The first operation, a senior official with official approval and a spotless public image, determined that you were a danger to their meticulously crafted image, not because you attacked them, but because your genuineness brought attention to their manufactured existence just by sharing a space. The second operation was a love affair based solely on deceit, in which one spouse unwittingly provided cover for actions that would shock anyone who found out. This was a strategic camouflage for actions that needed respectability as a shield, not a romantic relationship. Recruited by promises of promotion and membership in circles of authority they dearly desired, the third operation involved a whole network of accomplices who all felt they were a part of something greater than themselves. These 3 activities were going to combine to form a trap that would isolate, discredit, and eventually eliminate your influence as a chosen one. However, they failed to account for the fact that when you strike someone who is shielded by cosmic forces, those same forces start looking at not only the attack, but also every basis on which the assailants have formed their existence. Their entire lives was audited because of the game they started against you. This is where their basic blunder was exposed. They believed they were going after a regular individual who could be subdued using traditional methods. They didn't understand that those who are chosen have spiritual protection that actively looks for dangers and reacts with unnatural accuracy. Cosmic forces were studying them while they were studying you. When their own research techniques started to turn up information they had never planned to find, it was the first weakness in their armor. They unintentionally sparked inquiries into networks they were a part of, connections they wished kept secret, and actions they thought would never come under scrutiny while they were looking for information on you. Authorities began to worry why someone with their level of access was so interested in someone who didn't pose a real security risk after their background checks on you began to appear in systems they were monitoring. They were unaware that databases they were monitoring had red flags. When agencies who specialize in tracking down money trails became aware of financial anomalies related to their lifestyle, the love deception that served as their cover started to fall apart. It became impossible to provide a valid explanation for the discrepancy between their declared income and their actual spending habits. As their connection to the main operation drew unexpected attention, the recruited network began to face its own issues. They weren't ready for the liability that came with being linked to someone who was being investigated. Instead, the trap they set to catch you turned into a net that was closing in on them. Every week, on our Zoom conversations, you can work through challenging insights with members of the Obsidian Inner Order, who recognize that often the most traumatic events in life serve as our best instructors. Instead of fostering resentment, we foster wisdom. Make connections with truth-loving people. Click the link in the description to join the Obsidian Inner Order. The main avenue for their devastation was the government job that allowed them to target you. The same authorization that gave them permission to improperly investigate. You produced a trail of evidence that pointed investigators straight to their misuse of power. Every search they conducted, file they viewed, every connection they investigated was recorded in systems meant to detect precisely this type of wrongdoing. Their supervisors started getting questions concerning odd research trends. They circumvented security measures, leaving digital traces that were irreversible. The same weapons they used to assault you were also employed to record their transgressions of the law, ethics, and protocol. But their probe into you had unintentionally opened doors they desperately needed to keep closed. So the professional repercussions were only the start of their downfall. Their public image-supporting lifestyle necessitated money sources that were unable to endure the scrutiny brought on by their own behavior. When you give $12, it is sacred enough to wipe away a pair of tears, because God makes the small big. Agencies that had the means and power to track down the origin of every transaction were able to uncover the money laundering schemes that underpinned their seeming success. After years of operation, wire fraud schemes were suddenly subject to scrutiny they had never anticipated. Under a probe brought on by their own campaign against you, the complex financial engineering that underpinned their way of life started to fall apart. Not only was their government job terminated, but also served as the basis for lifelong criminal charges against them. Their abusive security clearance was permanently revoked, meaning they would never be able to work in the fields that had previously served as their main source of identification and income. When it became hard to conceal the truth about their actions, the romantic relationship that served as cover for their operations started to fall apart. The unaware spouse learned that their whole relationship had been a facade meant to give credibility to someone who secretly lived a totally other reality. However, the disclosure went beyond straightforward dishonesty. The partner learned that their alleged love relationship was actually engaged in behaviors that put it in a completely other category than they had ever thought possible. In an organization that exploited their connections and reputation as cover for businesses that would never be able to survive public scrutiny, what they believed to be love was actually strategic positioning. In reality, the money they had given, believing they were constructing a future together, had been used to finance activities that are currently the subject of a federal investigation. Their name was linked to actions they had never authorized, involved in plans they had never thought of, and appeared on documents they had never seen. All of the things they had used against you, including their combined social networks, professional networks they had introduced their partner to, and integrated family relationships. Their confidence had been abused to gain access to networks and data that were then utilized for objectives they would never have agreed to endorse. Their shared house, their joint assets, their planned future. All of this was now tainted by their involvement in illegal acts being punished by authorities who don't differentiate between willing and unwilling participants unless there is unmistakable proof of intent. Their relationship didn't simply terminate. It descended into legal culpability, necessitating total separation and private legal counsel from lawyers who specialize in removing clients from federal investigations. The recruited accomplices who had been promised development for their involvement in your target's pursuit started to experience the exact opposite of what they had been informed they could anticipate. Rather than being elevated, they were being investigated. They were denied access to chances they had previously taken use of, rather than being included in influential circles. They were left to deal with the repercussions on their own, rather than receiving protection through association. Every individual within the network had been persuaded that they were a part of something greater, something significant, and something that would help them both personally and professionally. They had been tricked into thinking that by getting rid of a dangerous person, they were safeguarding something valuable. Each accomplice, however, came to understand that they had been exploited as expendable assets in someone else's personal grudge as the inquiry progressed. It was never the intention to fulfill the promises made to gain their cooperation. The advantages they had been promised would never come to pass. Their recruiter was being prosecuted, which made it impossible for them to assist accomplices. Thus, the protection they had been promised would protect them from consequences was dissolving. When it was discovered that the financial incentives that had encouraged their involvement were financed by unlawful activity, authorities froze them. If you give $65, you start not just a project, but a story that changes destiny. As their connection to the scheme became widely known in their professional networks, the expected career promotion was replaced by career ruin. As peers started to doubt their judgment, morality, and dependability, the social elevation they had been given turned into exclusion. Each member of the network started assisting investigators one by one, offering proof against their former colleagues in return for less severe penalties. When they sought shelter from the consequences of following instructions that had put them in danger of criminal prosecution, they did not return the loyalty they had showed their recruiter. However, the most catastrophic discovery was still to come. Their campaign against you sparked an inquiry that revealed the true nature of their private lives, the true source of income, and the true reason for the relationship that served as their public front. The respectable professional image they had established served as cover for activities taking place in the shadows of society. Their magnificent lifestyle was made possible by financial success that came from sources that were not allowed to be revealed, taxed honestly, or subject to scrutiny that their own activities had unintentionally sparked. When the money trail investigators got to the source of their real revenue, they found enterprises that paled in contrast to their misuse of public funds. Laundering money was only the first step. Wire fraud was only the starting point. Their actual business ventures were the type that result in federal prosecutions with media attention that irreversibly ruin lives. Not only was their meticulously cultivated public persona untrue, it was the complete opposite of who they really were. Every element of respectability they provided was intended to hide actions that were the total opposite of the principles they professed to uphold. The inquiry that started with their campaign against you had found someone leading a wholly false life, upholding complex lies in every sphere of life, and being a part of networks that ran counter to everything their public image stood for. Their exposure wasn't occurring through standard investigation methods alone, which is where the scenario shifts from earthly justice to cosmic demonstration. Evidence was showing up in locations where it shouldn't have been. People who shouldn't have had the information were coming forward as witnesses. Through pathways that defied common sense, documents were emerging. Their exposure was being planned by the universe with an accuracy that beyond human planning. Not only were authorities being informed of every secret they had concealed, but also the very people whose opinions were most important to their meticulously cultivated image. Their family learned the truth about their actions in ways that were inexplicable and unavoidable. Their actual businesses were disclosed to their professional peers through means that precluded secrecy. Any chance of sustaining connections based on false premises was destroyed when their social circle learned of their deceptions through exposures. However, their targeting of you had prompted investigations into networks far broader than their own activity, which was the most significant cosmic intervention. They had unintentionally revealed huge networks of corruption that authorities had been looking for years, so they were facing more than simply punishment for their individual transgressions. Investigators discovered criminal organizations they had been attempting to break into for decades as a result of their campaign against you. They unintentionally became the key that opened investigations into levels of corruption that would result in indictments, headlines, and policy changes that went well beyond their own personal repercussions by going after someone who was shielded by cosmic forces. They believed they were assaulting a single person, but in reality, they had declared war on divine order itself, and the cosmos had responded by systematically destroying everything they had used to construct their fake existence. These actions combined to produce a series of outcomes that wiped out every facet of their manufactured existence. At the same time, their employment was terminated with criminal referrals, ensuring that they would never be able to find employment in any industry that required background checks or security clearance. Years of litigation were necessary to address financial entanglements tainted by criminal activities after their personal relationship ended due to legal issues. Evidence from their spouse's cooperation with the authorities disproved any chance of plea deals that may have restricted their exposure. Every former accomplice testified against you, proving every facet of their operation and dispelling any allegations of minimal involvement or lack of leadership responsibility. Their recruited network had been totally compromised. While they awaited investigations into money laundering and wire fraud accusations, with decades-long rather than years-long sentences, their financial resources were frozen. When you give $80, you extend a hand to heaven, and God fills it with miracles. It was discovered that the lifestyle they had led to uphold their public persona was totally financed by actions that are currently being investigated by the federal government, as being linked to their legal issues became too risky for anyone looking to preserve their own possibilities and reputation. Their social links were broken off. Their reputation became synonymous with betraying the public's confidence, replacing the respect they had earned through their professional position. Their family relationships were ruined by disclosures that went beyond professional wrongdoing to include personal lies, removing any chance of future reconciliation or trust. Most importantly, though, their entire identity was destroyed. The person they had feigned was exposed as being wholly made up, and the person they were in reality was someone no one could support, respect, or trust. As their manufactured world fell apart, your real life started to spread into areas that their meddling had obstructed. Now that their power had been removed, the opportunities that they had previously kept from getting to you were pouring freely. The professional networks they had sabotaged against you were now making a concerted effort to mend the connections they had discovered had been harmed by deceit and deception. Your reputation, which had been attacked, was being restored, not merely to its former state, but to a higher one, given the sharp contrast with your opponent's blatant dishonesty. Because the sources discovered that someone with ill intentions who is now totally discredited had influenced their earlier conclusions, the resources they had used to drive you away were now being channeled back to you, frequently quadrupled. Because the individuals involved realized they had been tricked into separating themselves from someone who embodied the honesty and integrity they valued. The social ties they had disrupted were being restored, frequently stronger than before. Your elevation, however, went beyond simply getting back what had been stolen. The universe was giving you access to more opportunities than you had previously had, more relationships than you had lost, and more resources than you had previously had. As a chosen one, your protection was transformative rather than merely defensive. In addition to removing the threat, the cosmic reaction to the attack lifted you to a position of material opportunity and spiritual influence that your previous adversaries could never achieve through man-made methods. However, the investigation that was prompted by their operation against you uncovered something far more heinous than personal corruption. It discovered a whole underground economy that was based on expressly targeting the chosen. Your opponents weren't acting alone or even in the beginning. They participated in a methodical effort to find spiritually talented people and plan campaigns to capture their energy, snatch away their chances, and reroute their heavenly assignments to fictitious avenues, because it gave them access to databases that identified persons with exceptional spiritual gifts, unexplainable success patterns, or cosmic protection signatures designating them as chosen ones. The government post they had misused was specifically sought after rather being picked at random. Their entire professional trajectory had been designed to provide them with access to data that would allow them to target divine assignments prior to their full activation. Their covert love relationship wasn't just a personal lie. It was a part of a wider network that used close relationships to study the spiritual practices of chosen ones, get close to them, and cause emotional distress during crucial stages of their heavenly missions. The unaware partner had been chosen because they were close to the circles where the chosen ones operated, not because they were compatible. The accomplices were not chosen at random. Rather, they were intentionally selected from groups of people who had not been able to use their own spiritual abilities and who were bitter toward those who had been able to connect with divine purpose. In addition to the promised benefits, the psychological gratification of undermining what they were unable to accomplish themselves served as motivation for their involvement. This deliberate targeting of the selected was a form of spiritual warfare that went well beyond personal grudges to interfere with the very order of the universe. Training materials, operating manuals, and coordination systems were utilized to target several selected individuals in several places, according to the inquiry. This suggests that an organization needs considerably more resources and preparation than any one person could manage. Sending $45 is filled with love, like Jesus' last words on the cross. Forgive, for they know not what they do. These operations were funded by financial networks that could be traced back to sources that for decades systematically diverted funds intended for divine missions toward man-made ones. Funds that were supposed to go to selected individuals through legal routes were being snatched, laundered, and used to finance anti-choice efforts. The cosmic reaction, however, became quite remarkable at this point. They unintentionally exposed the entire network to spiritual forces by focusing on you, which started methodically destroying not only their own operation, but the greater system they stood for. In addition to protecting you, your heavenly protection triggered a cosmic audit of all the elements involved in the plot against the chosen ones. Puzzled by inexplicable trends in people movements, communication networks, and financial flows, intelligence services unexpectedly acquired information exposing the spiritual warfare dimension they had never acknowledged. In reality, the systematic disruption of divine order that they had been monitoring as possible organized crime or terrorism was endangering the spiritual development of entire populations. Your individual attackers were experiencing more than just personal repercussions as a result of this wider conspiracy being exposed. They were being punished as part of a much larger operation and receiving penalties commensurate with the extent of their interference with cosmic purpose. Now, their individual transgressions were recognized as parts of a larger assault on the very foundation of divine order. Anyone else thinking about carrying out such an assault in the future can learn from the total annihilation of the person who attacked the chosen one. The world responded not with justice, but with a display of what occurs when someone tries to obstruct divine design by lying, coercing, and abusing power. Because of their exposure, there was no longer any chance that their demise was due to chance, bad luck, or the inevitable results of reckless behavior. Coordination that went beyond human planning was demonstrated by the accuracy with which they were unraveled, the timing of each discovery, and the connections between seemingly unrelated investigations. Targeting the chosen ones activates protection that transcends the worldly systems of justice and consequence, as anybody seeing their total destruction would know. However, the lesson went beyond protection. It illustrated how the successful defense of cosmic purpose might lead to elevation. Your ascent was more than simply recuperation. It was a metamorphosis into a person with greater spiritual power and greater material resources, more so, because you remained true to yourself in the face of manufactured resistance. In reality, the perilous game they played with you was a cosmic test that they were doomed to fail, but you passed it just by being true to who you really were in the face of pressure that was intended to drive you into reactionary dishonesty. The impact this cosmic correction is having on your assailants' bloodlines and family legacies only serves to highlight how profound it is. These days, children who were raised to carry out these spiritual warfare activities are being taken away from situations that could have tainted their own divine potential. Generational curses that target chosen ones and run through family lines are being permanently broken. Family members who disregarded or encouraged the plot are learning that their quiet cooperation had repercussions that went beyond personal preferences. Wealth that was never questioned is being taken away from spouses who turned a blind eye as resources were diverted from heavenly objectives. As the reality of their life's work becomes apparent, parents who brought up their kids to take part in these procedures are witnessing the disintegration of their legacies. However, at the same time, your own family is making historic strides. We are permanently removing the generational barriers that prevented your bloodline from accessing material resources and spiritual authority. Their attack on you activates cosmic protection that moves back and forth across your family timeline, resolving injustices and unlocking doors that have been closed for generations. As a chosen one, the operations that came together to form their perfect storm have now resolved into your ideal foundation for the next stage of your mission. Your career advancement has been made possible by their professional devastation. Your genuine connections have been freed from energy hindrance due to their relationship breakdown. Your sincere alliances are no longer hindered by their network disloyalty. You are now gaining the respect they gained through false representations by proving your integrity in the face of the most trying conditions and proving it to be unbreakable. Above all, their exposure has made the cosmic forces guarding your purpose visible, giving you insight into your own spiritual power and the universe's dedication to your accomplishment. $90 is a handkerchief for a mother's tear, a blanket for a homeless person, a prayer for a broken heart. You now understand that attacking you entails more than just the possibility of ordinary outcomes. It also triggers magical protection that methodically eliminates anything man-made while enhancing anything real. They believed they were playing a game with rules they didn't understand, opponents they hadn't seen, and unanticipated outcomes. By focusing on you, they set off both their own demise and your ascent to a position of monetary and spiritual power they could never achieve. The murmurs in the underground networks that led to this discovery attest to the fact that someone discovered what happens when real purpose is challenged by artificial power. The fallen empire was methodically destroyed by cosmic forces, defending a chosen individual for a divine mission, not by human adversaries. The risky game is ended. Everything was lost for them. More than everything, you gained. The universe has declared that those who are selected are impervious to harm, and everyone who fails to remember this lesson will be reminded by the total ruin of everything they accomplished through deceit, and the unimaginable rise of everything they assaulted out of jealousy. With the understanding that the cosmos will destroy anything that threatens your goal and raise you above anything that has ever been taken from you. Welcome to your new level of cosmic authority. You won by being who you were meant to be, and the game is over.